Hi all, Adi here from Haunts and Jaunts. As always, thank you so much for clicking on the video. I'm in deepest, darkest Hampshire and I'm at Holy Trinity Church in a place called Privett. The reason I'm here mainly is because one of my viewers told me that, I'm not sure if it was one or two of their family members had had very strange experiences here. Now, I wouldn't normally visit a church this young, it's only Victorian, but when I looked into it a little bit more, I found out that it is very unique because we're in the middle of nowhere. As you can see, it's really rural, really quiet, absolutely lovely. But this church is this huge Gothic masterpiece, and you just wouldn't expect to find something this large in such a rural place. The spire is 160 feet high, so I'm going to show you and I'll let you know if I have any strange experiences as I go around, and let me know if you notice anything. So yeah, let's go. There are some churches that you find in the middle of nowhere, and then there are churches that completely dominate the landscape around them, and Holy Trinity Church here in Privett, Hampshire is definitely one of those. And as I approached the village, that enormous tower and spire could be seen rising above the trees, and it's quite something to think that this rather grand church was built in what was and still is a very small rural community. The tower rises to 160 feet or nearly 49 metres, and it's one of the most obvious landmarks in this part of Hampshire. But there's much more to this church than just its impressive size. The church that we see here today dates from the Victorian period and was built between 1876 and 1878. I love the ironwork on this door. Look at this handle. Very unique, not seen one of those before, but beautiful doors. Now, there was actually a much older place of worship here, and there was a chapel here dedicated to the Holy Trinity, and that was recorded at Privett as far back as 1391. So although the present building is Victorian, the religious history of this particular spot goes back more than 6 centuries, and the old chapel was replaced by this much larger church, and the man who paid for it was a William Nicholson. And this is where the story gets particularly interesting. Now, there's loads of history, which is a fantastic display inside the church, so if you want a little bit more of that information, then please do pause the video. I have stopped on each of the information boards to give you the opportunity to read them. Now, the most unusual object I found here in this church was a wheeled bier. So this was designed to carry a coffin. So when you look at it, you can probably imagine it being used to transport someone from the home or perhaps the church to their final resting place out in the graveyard. I mean, it's got a cover on it, which is very unusual, so I don't know if there would have been like a canvas cover on it or if it would have just been covered in flowers. I couldn't find out any more information about it, but it's a very practical object, and I think things like this are fascinating because it's reminders of how different our everyday lives are now, because today we'd hardly give a second thought to how a coffin is transported, but in a rural community like Privett, having a funeral cart like this would have been an important part of village life. And I loved that someone has gone to the trouble, Robert Hollis, who's the church warden, to make an extensive churchyard map. And there was an email address there on the front, so if you are interested, you can email him and he says that he will send you an electronic copy of it. Wonderful. I wish more churches could do this, but I appreciate that the records aren't as good in varying parishes, so it's not always a possibility, and also it's a huge amount of work. Sorry, I went off track there a little bit. I want to go back now to the story about who built the church, and that was a William Nicholson, and he was from a very wealthy family behind the J&W Nicholson and Co., which was a London-based gin distillers, and the family had made its fortune from gin, and William used that wealth to establish himself here in Hampshire, and in 1863 he purchased the Basing Park estate near Privett. And once he got here, he didn't just build himself a lovely country estate and leave the village alone. He did, in fact, have a huge influence on Privett. And a number of cottages and other buildings were constructed around here for people who worked on the estate. So William Nicholson effectively transformed much of the area. And Holy Trinity was probably the grandest expression of that influence, and he commissioned the Victorian architect Sir Arthur Bloomfield to design this new church. And Bloomfield at the time was a very well-known architect, and he went for a Gothic revival design based largely on an early English style of the Middle Ages. And considering the size of this church, he certainly didn't hold back. The church cost around £22,000 to build, which was an enormous amount of money in Victorian times. And you can see here where the money went. These are Italian marble mosaic floors, and they're one of the most outstanding features here of Holy Trinity Church. So, in fact, no expense was spared on the interior, and the original description of the church tells us that the floors throughout the building were made completely using Italian mosaic and were carried out by a firm called Burke and Company. And there's also this absolutely beautiful stone lectern. And as I made my way towards the chancel, one of the things that really caught my eyes are those beautiful stone steps. Just the quality of the workmanship here is just absolutely staggering. Now, the church was built in the 1870s, like I mentioned, but the craftsmanship that went into it, when you slow down and actually take a look at the details, I mean, the stonework is so beautifully finished, and even something as simple as those steps up into the chancel feel like it was made to be part of the overall design of the church rather than just simply being something functional. And then as we step up towards the altar, it's quite difficult not just to stop here for a moment and take it all in. Look at that craftsmanship around the chancel, that absolutely beautiful carved reredos behind the altar. There's so much detail in it, and it really draws your eye towards this end of the church. And then surrounding it, above it, you've got the beautiful stained glass windows. And when I think about the amount of skill that's involved in creating something like this, particularly in the 19th century, it really is quite remarkable. Everything had to be designed, carved, fitted by hand, and the level of the finished result is incredibly impressive. And I loved that has a fireplace. So I don't know if this was originally a private chapel, or maybe it was the vestry. This wasn't a little village church where the builders simply put together what was needed and left it at that. Mr. Nicholson clearly wanted something very special, and he got it. I mean, he employed some very talented craftsmen to create it, and the further you look, the more little details you start to notice. The stone carvings, the decorative work, the glass, and of course that incredible Italian mosaic floor beneath my feet. I'm going to head back outside and have a little wander around the churchyard, and after seeing all that incredible craftsmanship inside, it's quite nice to come back outside and see the church from a completely different perspective. Because when you're standing in the churchyard, you really get a sense of just how peaceful this tiny little corner of Hampshire is. And it's hard to imagine that this quiet countryside was once connected to a railway, that the Nicholson family had such a huge influence over the area, and that this enormous church was built here in the 19th century. And of course, the churchyard itself is another part of that story. Every one of these gravestones represents somebody who lived here, worked here, raised a family, or perhaps spent their entire life in this little community. And some of the names you'll find around the churchyard are connected to the families and the churches that we've been talking about, while others are just ordinary people who lived and worked in the community. And I always find myself wondering about the people behind the names. What were their lives like? What did they do? And what did their village look like while they were alive? Because when I walk around a churchyard like this, I'm quite literally walking through generations of local history. And then, of course, there's the church itself standing behind us. And it's quite extraordinary building, isn't it, when you think of it? This huge Gothic Victorian church built at such a considerable expense, surrounded by the quiet rural Hampshire countryside. And perhaps that's just what I'll take away from Privett. It's not just the architecture, although that's certainly impressive. It's the whole story surrounding it. I'm going to wrap the video up here. What did you think of it? Interesting. It did have a vibe, I'd say, but I didn't see anything. Heard some strange noises, but it is very quiet here, so it could have been wildlife. And a couple of times I thought something was touching my leg, but it was just spider webs, you know, when you're walking through them. So yeah, that's it. So I do hope you enjoyed our visit to this Victorian church. So it's not somewhere I would normally visit on the channel, but I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and I was in the area. And I've also just spotted the trunk of what was probably a very old yew tree. Let's go and have a quick look at that before I go. So if you did enjoy it, if you could please like, subscribe, hit the hype button, do all those things. And if you want to support the channel a little bit more, you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link on the screen. And I'll also pop the other links down below, because this is looked after by the Church's Conservation Trust. And I always make a donation when I visit, every single time. I'm just making a very small contribution, but every little bit helps. If we all put £10–20 in every time we visited here, it would really help with the upkeep of these amazing buildings. So anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.